Hello, and welcome to Matter's Advancing Health Equity series. I'm Stephen Collins. I'm the CEO of Matter. We're a healthcare technology incubator and an innovation hub with a mission to accelerate the pace of change of healthcare. We do three things in service of our mission. First, we incubate startups. Since we launched 7 years ago, we've worked with more than 700 companies, ranging from very early to growth stage startups, and we have a suite of services to help them at every stage of development. Second, we work with large organizations such as health systems and life sciences companies and payers to help them strengthen their innovation capacity. We help them find value in emerging technology solutions, empower internal innovators to unlock the value of their ideas, and create a more human-centered healthcare experience through system-level collaborations. Third, we're a nexus for people who are passionate about healthcare innovation. We bring people together to be inspired and learn and connect with each other. We produce a lot of programs, including large-scale events for the broader community, as well as small forums that are exclusively for our members. Last year, we launched a series on advancing health equity designed to explore the issue through a lens of innovation and technology. And today's program focuses on skin cancer. The most common type of cancer will affect about 20% of the US population. And while Black people are less likely to get skin cancer, their outcomes once diagnosed are, like so many other conditions, worse than white individuals. So we'll explore the implications in our discussion today and address the importance of early detection and screening and the development of inclusive and accessible technologies. We have 4 people joining us today for this conversation. Kyoko Crawford is co-founder and CEO of SkinIO. It's a smartphone-based skin cancer screening system. She's a Harvard graduate who started her own technology design and development firm before launching SkinIO in 2014. Scott Barrows is director of OSF Healthcare's Innovation Design Lab. Scott is also a medical artist and a professor of medicine, engineering, design, and biomedical visualization at both the University of Illinois and Bradley University. Sam Glassenberg is the founder and CEO of levelx, which makes medical simulations using advanced video gaming technology, and it has helped train more than 750,000 medical professionals to date. He was previously the CEO of the leading independent game publisher in Hollywood. Traci Dunn will lead the conversation with Kyoko, Scott, and Sam. Traci is Chief Human Resources Officer and Head of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at VillageMD. She has held a number of senior roles in large and medium-sized companies, including previously Accenture and McKesson. Traci, Scott, Sam, Kyoko, thank you so much for joining us. I'm looking forward to the conversation, and Traci, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I'm very excited to be with you all today and having the pleasure of moderating this discussion. You know, skin is the largest human organ, and while at the surface of every person, you know, it's often a neglected component of our overall health. So I want to start off by asking our panel about current challenges with caring for skin, both from a preventative health perspective as well as diagnosis for conditions like skin cancer. So Kyoko, I'm going to start with you. Can you share with us some of the most common concerns when it comes to skin health?
Sure. No, thank you, Traci, and hello, everybody. Thank you for having me today on the panel. So when we talk about skin, I think it's very important to note, again, it is our most external organ of our bodies. It's our largest one, but somewhat ironically, it tends to be quite invisible to us. And so when we think about some of the common conditions, I think there are some blockbusters out there. A lot of it is also amplified by a lot of the commercials and treatments that are being pushed to us as well. But you have kind of the common ones, right? Like acne. Everyone kind of goes through that in their teenage years. It's a rite of passage, and you know, for a subset, it continues to persist. Psoriasis, eczema, rosacea, a lot of those tend to also take up a lot of mind share when it comes to common skin conditions. And of course, there is skin cancer. As Stephen mentioned, you know, 1 out of 5 Americans is going to get it by the age of 70. It is tremendously prevalent. So all of those tend to be the skin conditions that we are aware of, but not aware enough of to often act in ways that can lead to better outcomes.
Awesome. That is fantastic. Thank you so much. Next, I want to dive a little, into the additional challenges that skin cancer prevention and screening pose to various communities. What are you all seeing in providing equitable care? So Sam, I'm going to turn to you next. So levelx has taken a unique approach to clinical dermatological diagnostics. Oh my gosh, I cannot talk. Particularly with top burn. So can you discuss the importance of technology behind early detection and screening for prevention?
Sure. So look, I think actually in some cases, what we see is technology is actually making the problem worse. And I think a lot of the examples we hear about on the news is, oh, there's a new pulse oximeter that, works with this, with light in an interesting way, but, oh, when they tested it, they didn't test it on people with darker skin tones and it doesn't work. Or AI algorithms to diagnose and treat disease, but the AI algorithms are all trained on Caucasian skin, and therefore it doesn't work to try to detect the disease on skin of color. So this is this is exacerbating what is a pretty, a known problem in healthcare in general, specifically in dermatology, which is with skin cancer and in other areas, people of color just are not getting the same outcomes. Stephen talked about this, are not getting the same outcomes when they go to the dermatologist. And it's not out of malice, right? It's simply because that dermatologist has not had the opportunity to train their brain and see your skin disease at your severity on your skin tone nearly as much as they had for the other 90% of their patients that are Caucasian. Right. And you would think that, education would be able to solve this problem, but I think in many ways it's only, again, exacerbated. I like this example. I literally just went on Amazon and I'll make myself a little bit smaller here. And just pulled I just started flipping through, Fitzpatrick's color, like one of the major example dermatology textbook. You see the pattern, right? If you actually look at the literature, 90% of the content is all on Caucasian skin. So one of the things we were doing at levelx is, we build games for doctors, and we wanted to build a game for dermatologists. And so we were asking, what are the challenges that you face? And skin, and diagnostic and treatment on skin of color is one of those issues that they highlighted. As Stephen mentioned, my background's actually in the video games industry. I used to work at places like Microsoft and Lucasfilm. And in games, we've actually gotten really good over the last few decades at rendering ultra-realistic characters with ultra-realistic skin. I like to, pick the example of, Call of Duty. You can literally, have a dozen soldiers on screen and zoom into the face of one of the characters, and, this is what it looks like. And so what we've been doing at levelx is building on top of that game technology to create a system that allows us to basically generate any skin disease at any severity on skin of any color and on any part of the body. So none of these images that are behind me are real. All of these are just emergent from a video game engine that is basically simulating light bouncing around pigment and different elements of tissue to recreate skin disease on different skin tones. It's all, as you can see, it's all video game. It's all not real. But then what we're able to do is use this to train dermatologists to recognize, based on imagery, to train their brain how to recognize those diseases, because the reference material simply doesn't exist. So we need to create it. And we end up doing this a lot in melanoma and other areas, like, as Stephen mentioned, because the dermatologists simply just don't know how to recognize it.
That's so powerful, and I think is truly going to make a difference, because like you said, if you haven't been trained on that, you don't know what to look for. Something that you see and diagnose every day may look different, on a person of color. So very, very excited about the work that you're doing there at levelx. Scott, let's bring you into this discussion. Based on your work with OSF Design Lab, what are some of the gaps that you're seeing and in the challenges about skin cancer?
Well, the biggest gap we're seeing is access. We deal with communities not only in an urban setting, but in a rural setting. And in take Illinois, for instance. In rural Illinois, central Illinois has the highest rates of melanoma in the state. However, there are fewer dermatologists per population in central Illinois. The agricultural focus is very big. The lack of sunscreen sometimes and preventative factors, that's really essential. So we have high melanoma rates. In urban settings, as Sam mentioned, the underserved communities there's a history of health inequity, skin tone differences. I'll talk a little bit about some of the solutions we've looked at, but it's a huge problem. And if especially melanoma, if it's not caught early, then it has devastating outcomes. And then there are elements we look at that are related to both urban and rural and suburban to some degree, besides screening and prevention awareness and education. We always try to address the social determinants of health needs, the needs of people in different communities. Health literacy is also something that's very important. And I think with both our other guests, they do a fantastic job of adding to how can we better understand and integrate into, the need of health or skin cancer. And finally, as Sam also mentioned, dermatology education in medical schools is often shortchanged. There's just too much information, and that led to the development of an app that, again, I'll talk about in a little bit later. But it's screening, access, and getting risk factors across and getting people to wear sunscreen and not go to tanning beds.
Absolutely. Kyoko, SkinIO has made skin cancer detection seamless, for your end users, enhancing the patient experience. How do you see accessible technologies assisting providers and health systems with supporting their patients? What do you see?
Yes. Yeah. So I think one of the big issues, and I think both Sam and Scott have touched on this, there are kind of systemic level issues that surround this entire topic. But one of the kind of pure numbers ones is that there just aren't that many dermatologists, right? And I think you're looking at the 10,000 or so in this country. And with that few number of dermatologists, it's no surprise they aren't equally distributed geographically across the country either, right? And so you have huge, macro deserts, dermatology deserts, as well as micro ones like Scott describes within the state we're all in right now. And so because of that, this is where when we look at technologies such as SkinIO, so, with SkinIO, what we've done is we've distilled this total body photography, kind of a proxy for the full body skin exam that a dermatologist performs on a patient. We've put that onto a mobile app, very accessible medium, one that can be used by anybody, anywhere, right? And that anybody and the anywhere is very important because that ultimately opens up access to this. Because a lot of it is the providers, most patients aren't reaching these specialists, right? There aren't enough of them. You try to get in, sometimes you're waiting a year to get in. And if you have something like melanoma, to Scott's point, you don't have that time necessarily. So, our technology, by nature of being a mobile app on a commodity device, allows us to reach communities and populations who may not otherwise even know to go into a dermatologist's office, right? And that could take the form of events. It can take the form of community outreach. It can be your workplace. It can be your school. It can be a lot of things like that. The other part of it with skin cancer in particular is it's not just a one-time thing. It's not just getting lucky that one time and catching it, right? It is about tracking your skin over time. It's the changes that matter as much as that anomaly you catch that one time you happen to be in front of a doctor. And that's another area where technologies and platforms that are able to store this data and make sure it persists helps in that mission. Once you screen with a platform like SkinIO, you now have a digital record of your skin. That's your best baseline to compare and monitor your skin over time. And so both those components matter when there just simply aren't enough specialists on the back end to take care of you in person.
Absolutely. One thing that I'm hearing in all of y'all's responses is just the importance of kind of proactive prevention, and then also education. Say I'm going to throw a question to you, but one of the things I wanted to add to that, I just got back from Disney last week. That little guy behind me, that 6-year-old, we were down in Florida and it was hot, really, really hot every day. And we did 3 parks. It was insane. But one thing that was interesting was, every day I'm slathering the kid with just all kinds of sunscreen, had extra in my bag and, all throughout the time that we were there. And one of my cousins was like, isn't that a little overboard, Traci? We've got melanin, we don't get skin cancer. And so clearly, obviously, Blacks don't get it at the same rate as our white counterparts, but as was mentioned earlier, when we do, it's really bad. And so I wanted you, Sam, to talk a little bit about how clinicians can be as proactive as possible, with diagnosis and treatment across communities, but also with just education and awareness, and just I think that could make a huge difference as well.
Great question. Look, first, the other thing is we all often think of this almost in terms of like 2 skin tones, but it's not. There's, there are many people of color in many different groups, and, there's all sorts of spectrums of skin tones. And so, it's very important to not that like the first step is making sure that you sort of have that broader exposure, Pacific Islander and whatnot, like, these diseases manifest in different ways, in a wide range of communities of color. In terms of education, in the United States, both primary care physicians as well as dermatologists, they need to earn a certain amount of continuing medical education credit every year toward renewing their medical license. So, obviously, if they want to, they can play top derm and earn CME credit from learning about this from learning about skin diseases on skin of color. We're not, you don't have to just play a video game. There are societies out there like the Skin of Color Society that put out content that is specific to how to not only diagnose, but also treat patients of color. And there are societies that are focusing on it, not just from a dermatological perspective, but in all sorts of, different, whether it's, managing heart disease, diabetes, in different ways, genetic diseases and the way they manifest in different communities. So there's just tons of educational material out there. And, physicians typically have to do they have to do some amount of continuing education anyway. So, the opportunity then becomes to pursue those avenues that are providing education, not necessarily just focused on one group, but giving you that greater breadth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Fantastic. I'd like to flip back over to you, Scott. I apologize here. We're having some issues with my screen. So Scott, for you, as you continue to do your research on this topic, what are some of the future trends that we should be aware of?
Well, what we're talking about today, right now, is a future trend, but at least in my day-to-day activity and research that we're working on, one is the expansion of community health workers, and that's both in, again, rural and urban areas. These are members of the community, your neighbors, that receive training, and can help build the trust in the community and give good like links to who to go to and who to talk to, and even finding a dermatologist or a doctor, or reinforcing, some concerns a neighbor might have. So CHW expansion is really important. It's going on very well in some areas, not so well in others. Another is access, as I mentioned, and mobile devices certainly have changed everything. But as Sam mentioned, it's not the cure-all for everything. Some of the things we've been working on is we look at those most vulnerable, and like homeless people, they might not have a mobile device, so we're putting iPads in kiosks and homeless shelters and giving them all the links they can, so they can access social determinants of health, community health workers, providers, nurses, how to get assistance. So telehealth is really a big trend that just has exploded. And I have to stress, the human touch will never be replaced. That is essential in being a partner with people in the community, because there is a lack of trust. So that's essential, and the partnership in the community is very, very important. And that's not just with, going to local neighborhoods. It could be churches, it could be barbershops, it could be organizations, community health organizations, libraries. And then partnering in education is really a critical piece of this, not only grade school, but with universities and colleges. I will mention that we have several grants that with the University of Illinois, both in Urbana and Chicago. One of them, again, it aligns with what Sam was talking about, but it addresses the shortage of dermatology education, and with some of the similar components, although not as beautiful as what levelx has created. We've created an app prototype that uses an elastomer with tactile lesions on it, and it's put over an iPad or an iPhone, so that people, a lot of times dermatology is diagnosed by touch or by tactile sensations. So this will show crusts and ulcerations and all sorts of different kinds of tactile manifestations. And because it's over like an iPad or an iPhone, the light comes through, and building into this elastomer and this education, we've been working on an augmented reality portion of the app. That is, can we look under the surface of the skin for like melanoma or basal cell carcinoma, and even isolate out, the tumor or the lesion and look at it, how deep did it go, and educating people, mostly medical students, but what does this do? It's interactive, and it builds a library too as pictures are taken. One other app that graduate students at the University of Illinois at Chicago created for a class is an app for variations in skin tone. It has sliders that you can adjust because melanoma, basal cell carcinoma will look very different in someone of Mediterranean, African American, someone from Scandinavia. So it's a really great app, and getting young people involved and engaged and getting it into the schools is really important. So those are trends, and I think can all be linked with these great resources that are being created and do such a wonderful job. So those are just some of the trends.
Yeah, no, it's great because, I think the point you're making, you got to meet people where they are. And when you talk about, I think about now, there's so many of those apps in other aspects of life that folks are used to having that ability. I mean, something like super simple as I was looking for a new nail polish, and I was able to, on the app, be able to scroll over to darker skin tone and like, oh yeah, that bright yellow doesn't look as good as I thought it was going to look on me. But being able to meet folks where they are and giving them some of the tools that they're used to in other aspects of their lives, I think can be really powerful for us. I want to remind the group as well, listeners, that we do have the chat there at the bottom. It looks like we've got a question in here, and so I encourage others to do the same. One question here is, as a melanoma survivor, do you promote doing research in families with, family history of melanoma? Many people with melanoma did not get it, from too much sun exposure. I'll open that up to anyone to respond.
That's a very good question. And my sister was a melanoma survivor, and that was asked. I am not a dermatologist, so I cannot give a firm answer on that, but I know there are other factors besides light.
Yeah, and caveat, I am not a dermatologist as well, either. My co-founder is, but no, that's a really good question. And I think that just highlights that there are a variety of factors that go into kind of your general risk profile. And part of this, when we talk about education and awareness, I know it's a big part of this discussion. I mean, a lot of people are not aware or not entirely sure of their risk, right? And yes, sun exposure is a big part of this for the skin cancers. Sunburns are directly linked to melanoma. Sun exposure, all of that stuff would be for squamous and basal as well. But, you can get melanoma in your eye. You can get it in places where the sun don't shine either, right? And so there are genetic factors as well. Family history does matter. And because we are aware of just how just unaware or uninformed certain populations or certain subgroups can be. From a screening perspective, it is a softer landing. It's a way to bring somebody into that journey of knowing more. Yeah. And we also, as part of our programs, have intake questions that specifically ask, and they're not onerous, they're just asking if you know your personal history, if you know your family history, where did you grow up? Because all of those things contribute. If you grew up in Florida versus growing up in Michigan, there's just different cumulative exposure that you've had over your lifetime, regardless of your skin type. And so there are a lot of factors that all matter. And part of this is being able to have better data around this that's diverse, that is multidimensional, because skin cancers there are a lot of them, and they are a lot more complex than just linked to one thing or the other, right? And better understanding that landscape across the board, and even for physicians, right? Like this should play all the way up and through that education process. All of that can only make this better, so that the entire system can serve more of the population more effectively.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question. We often assume that diagnosis is something that's done visually. It's not. Well, at least in a lot of cases, it isn't. And so, one of the areas, this is a big area of focus for us in dermatology and in just about every major specialty, which is basically how do you capture the challenge of diagnosis, whether it's visual or whether it's, looking at test results or asking, for example, about things like family history. So we spend a lot, our designers spend a lot of time figuring out how do we capture the puzzle of diagnosis? How do you train a doctor not just to be able to, or a medical professional, not just to be able to recognize, a visual of skin disease, but how do you get them to think about, for example, we have games like this where you're literally like, we're not rewarding you for guessing the right answer. You have to order the right tests, ask the right questions, look at things like family history in order to not only identify what the patient has, but eliminate the differential diagnoses. And so when you think about training medical professionals to be diagnosticians, really what you're training is cognitive, reductive, and deductive reasoning skills that are based on lots of knowledge. And doing this in an effective way can be very tricky. But technology can really help here. In the absence of technology, they're inevitably going to learn it by practicing on live patients.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. The innovation definitely is going to play such a great role in addressing some of these challenges. One of the things I was noticing as well as I was looking through the questions, that we've got several participants who have joined from Nigeria. And so thinking about innovation and access, and especially technology, being able to, have an impact on these challenges on a global scale. So as we think about innovation, I would love for you all to just talk a little bit about how some of the things that your respective companies are doing can have an impact globally. So Sam, while I still see you big on my screen, I'm going to toss that one to you first. Just talk about, just the impact of some of these, innovative solutions and how they can, drive progress and help to address some of these challenges on a global scale.
So, I mean, that's the beauty of digital. And
Yeah.
I think Kyoko already called it out, right? Like we're creating mobile apps that are available for free worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
So what that means is, in order to train on things, like you no longer need a, $50 million simulation center in a major, academic medical institution. You have everything you need in your pocket.
Right.
I think so that goes to, that gets a lot of global reach, but I think it even goes beyond that. So, Scott you were mentioning the sort of meet people where they are, and Scott was talking about examples of, actually having to the value of the personal connection. Like being on a phone by yourself and learning is one thing, but like there are also, a big area of focus for us has been creating technologies that allow people to collaboratively train on how to treat and diagnose virtual patients. Here, actually, I wasn't planning on demoing this, but maybe I will. Kyoko or Scott, I'm just gonna paste a little link in the host chat. You want to go ahead and click that, and we'll show a little something. Unmute yourselves though. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Perfect. Okay, great. So, all right. So both of you see on your computers this knee, right? Perfect. Okay, great.
No.
Oh, you don't? What about you, Scott?
Hold on.
I do.
Hold on. Sorry.
Okay, great. So Scott, you're out in
now I
Peoria.
see it. Now I see it. Okay, sorry.
Great. So you can see basically I'm here on my computer doing surgery on this virtual patient. So I can control the elasticity of the skin. I can open this patient up here on the left. Scott, I want you to open up the patient on the right. Yeah, really, you gotta pull it. Give it a good tug. All the way, pull, drag, good. All right, excellent. Oh, here,
Keeps popping
there you
back.
go, you got it, excellent. So you're in Peoria, I'm in Chicago, and the two of us are doing surgery together on a virtual patient simulated in the cloud. And so this is an example, you're in Peoria, I'm in Chicago, that's not impressive. We actually use this technology worldwide, where you can have a doctor at Stanford training, let's say a doctor in Nigeria, collaboratively over Zoom or MS Teams. And so, these are just examples. This is repurposed cloud gaming technology. It's the same tech behind PlayStation Now, only you can reuse this to, for example, train, a healthcare worker in Africa or Asia, anywhere in the world, how to do a procedure, how to diagnose a patient, and we're just interacting with it collaboratively. So like there are a lot of opportunities to sort of take that telehealth analogy, but actually make it work for remote medical training.
That's fantastic. Great. Thank you so much for sharing that and demonstrating that as well, the impact that technology can have globally. Kyoko, I want to switch to you to just talk a little bit again about innovation and how that addresses some of these challenges. So what effect have you seen that your solution has had on the detection of skin cancer? And there was another question that came in. I'm going to package these together. What are some of the key barriers to adoption of some of the things that your company is driving from both a provider and patient perspective?
Sure. Yeah, no, those are excellent questions. So from an innovation standpoint and kind of the effect and the impact that we've seen, A big one is access. What we've done in terms of, going into the market has been really, it so happens, we've been able to really open this up to communities and populations who don't traditionally have access. A lot of our clients tend to be, they can be, responsible for blue collar workers. They can be union groups. They can be, or they can be in Sun Belt areas, right, where they're just geographically at a lot of risk. And the opportunity to leverage technology like ours in the form factor that it is, where we can easily come on site. We could go to a railroad, we can go to a warehouse, we can go on site with pop-up tents and screen people who wouldn't know, and anecdotally going there, we can hear stories of most people have never seen a dermatologist. Many may not even know they have to. We've caught melanomas in individuals on their arms who had never seen a dermatologist, barely knew what a dermatologist was. So the opportunity to really meet people where they are is huge. And the impact of that is both clinically, early detection, but also expanded education and awareness. And it goes hand in hand because at the same time, we're also on our end, accumulating a database of this multi-layered view of the skin that's also longitudinal, that provides that educational content for the physicians who end up seeing some of these patients to better understand the communities that they're serving. And on the flip side, for the system itself, it's creating a more efficient, pre-qualified, filtered pipeline of patients who need to be seen by those specialists, not just the people who happen to get in for an appointment because they made it a year ago, but the people who actually need to be seen, right? So it's creating the efficiencies in that delivery model as well. So that's really, that's been a really impactful side of our business. Now, in terms of challenges, it's the challenges of all of us being human, right? And the various inertias that we hold, and that's true for providers as much as it is for patients. For a big part of it on the patient side is awareness. It is, a third of Americans don't even wear sunscreen. They don't know anything about skin cancer, right? Like there's a huge awareness gap, educational gap. But, another is inertia in general, right? We don't necessarily always do things we should do. We do things we want to do, which don't tend to overlap often with things we should do, right? So there's that. But you can offset a lot of that by meeting people where it's convenient. Just because something is accessible, just because something's an app and that means it's accessible, doesn't necessarily mean it's always convenient for you.
Sure.
On the provider side, it's also the inertia of their profession, right? And the result of that training and just the cumulative, I think cumulative tissue that results from that training. And I think with dermatologists in particular, they don't lack for patients. They're so scarce. They don't lack for patients. They're doing business just fine. But the opportunity to break through and say, these are the patients you need to be seeing. These are the patients who wouldn't otherwise access the system that you should be seeing. These are patients you should draw into your system at multiple levels, even at the primary care level. Those are kind of what we're finding to be ways to really start to shift the mindset and make that access across the system a lot more equitable for more of the population.
No, that's fantastic. Sam, I think, kind of building on what you were demonstrating and sharing with us a little bit ago, there are discussions centered around kind of the role of gaming and video games in improving health outcomes. How did you even come up with the concept to use video games as a platform to really drive that education and awareness and provider learning in it?
Oh, how did levelx get started?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I would love to say that it was some grand idea I had, but it wasn't. This company was founded entirely by accident and parental guilt.
Tell us more.
All right, it's a very Chicago story. All right, so all right, hold on. I have my artist drew pictures of the whole thing. So all right, so like I said, I've spent my career in games. My successful career in the games business has basically made me the disgrace of my family because I come from a long line of doctors. My grandfather was a famous doctor. My parents are both doctors. My wife, aunts, uncles. I'm the idiot who never went to medical school. To show you how bad it got, in 2006, I accepted a technical Emmy on behalf of my team at Microsoft for pushing the cutting edge of interactive entertainment. It's not the Emmy they show on TV, it's the one they do before, but it's the same statute. And so I call my parents to be like, hey, Dad, I'm going to accept an Emmy. And he was an anesthesiologist here at Northwestern. He goes, all right, Sam, he didn't realize this was coming because nothing had been announced. And he answers the phone. All right, Sam, that's very nice. But in this family, we only recognize Nobel Prizes. He goes, you're not yet 30 years old. You can still go to medical school. I'll pay for it. This is the world I come from. There's medicine and there's everything else. So in 2012, my dad gives up. And he says, all right, you're too old to go to med school. So at least put all this gaming nonsense to good use and make me a game to train my colleagues to do a fiber optic intubation. It's a difficult procedure. We only do it on, difficult presenting patients. So it can be a struggle. So just please make me a game. Again, meet people where they are. He said, make me a game they can play on their phones. I don't want to have to drag anybody to the simulation center. So out of guilt, I'm running a Hollywood game company. I'm busy. Out of guilt, I sit down for 3 weekends and I throw together a crappy little game for my father that I upload to the App Store. And I don't think about it again. Here, Dad, here's the link. Your friends can download it. Leave me alone. I've got a company to run. 2 years later in 2014, he calls me. He goes, hey, Sam, how many people downloaded the app? Dad, I don't know how many of your friends downloaded your game. I'll check for you. I went and I looked. We had 100,000 doctors, nurses, and airway specialists who've been playing this thing. This is, again, like Kyoko was talking about. It's like, this is the power of mobile. So I Google it. I'm like, why is this happening? What happened? I discover, unbeknownst to me, they've been doing efficacy studies on this crappy game I made for my father that shows it's drastically improving physician performance. And they're doing these studies at medical schools all over the world. And so that was the moment where I realized, all right, there's something here. And that was the motivation for starting levelx. So what if, instead of just Sam in his spare time, we took, the top game designers, artists, engineers from around the industry, teamed them up with hundreds of physician advisors and contributors from around the world, and put them on the challenge of capturing the practice of medicine using video games. We actually incubated at Matter. OSF was actually one of our early investors. So yeah, but again, no grand idea. It was all just accidental and parental guilt.
That is fantastic. And the visuals to explain the story, that I love it.
Game artists are very talented. They have a lot of fun.
Fantastic. This conversation has been amazing. I want to move to one other section before we run out of time. Just really thinking about how innovation, move forward in this space. And for some of the innovators that are in the audience, I'm sure that we have several that are listening today. Let's talk a little bit about some of the approaches that they might consider at this time. So I'll start with you, Scott, and all of you can answer this question, but, how do health systems co-create and collaborate with non-traditional partners like startups? And conversely, for those startups to be better informed about how, solutions are deployed. In the case of levelx, you had your dad and his friends, and then 100,000 others that were able to support in that. But just want to talk a little bit about collaboration and how some of the innovators in the audience can and should collaborate with others to reduce the gaps in accessibility of cancer screening and just development across multiple communities. So, Scott, I'll turn to you first. Any thoughts you have on that?
Well, before I address that, I do want to mention to our friends from Nigeria that the medical school here in Peoria has a program where our medical students go to Africa and work in several different areas with remote access. And it helps, we're not all that different, in large rural parts of the United States, the same access issues exist, but also getting to know how different cultures, how we can work better, that's really important. So I did want to throw that in there because that's really important. From OSF's perspective, as Sam mentioned, we do have OSF Ventures that would support, it's a process of application and review, but that is one venue. The one that I'm most involved with is our collaboration with universities. We do have research grant mechanisms set up with the University of Illinois, Urbana, Chicago, and we're also entering some new agreements with like Bradley University and others. But these grants are innovation grants where they're not huge, but we can explore along with external partners and partners in engineering and medicine and social work, whatever makes the best fit. That is a solution. Another one that is we're working a lot with is the Illinois Innovation Network. It's funded out of the University of Illinois system, but we have a grant right now with Illinois State University to increase pediatric vaccination in central Illinois. So the IIN networks and innovation networks, we have a really great lab in Peoria called Distillery Lab, and it's set up exactly for this purpose. People with an idea, it could be a single person business or a small business or someone with an idea. It's putting those together and incubating those. And, it's all part of, I think, a larger system. I guess we'll close with the thing that's most important for health equity is to listen. So our partnerships are also with the communities that we serve and want to serve and serve better. So listening and having people at the table is really an important part of a partnership for us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Kyoko, just from a innovators, side there as well, talk a little bit about, that question of just, some of the ways in which we can increase the collaboration to find solutions.
Yeah, I think, well, a big part of it is recognizing that too. I think there tends to be an inclination from a technology perspective that it can solve everything. It can disrupt and solve and change the world all alone. And I think with healthcare, it's most imperative that we work within the ecosystem that's there. Feel about it how you do, and it's fragmented, it's broken. There are a lot of aspects about it, but one of the things that at least we've found at SkinIO is that it is a point of pride that we aren't a self-serve app. We're not out there disrupting and clogging up or stopping up how people get care. We're trying to make it better, and that requires partners, that requires collaborating, that requires connecting to the ecosystem in which we ultimately do connect and access care. And so, I think and that in of itself is a mindset, right? And sometimes it's not one that comes naturally when you're trying to be innovative, when you're trying to be revolutionary, when you're trying to change things for the better, and you're trying to do it alone as a startup, out there. And so, and on the flip side, these larger systems and provider networks, plans, all of those can seem large, impenetrable, and difficult to work with. But finding kind of those avenues, and I think, increasingly with innovation labs and innovation programs and ways for, I think a lot of these systems are making their efforts to reach out to communities, and recognizing that collaborative effort is what makes that impact ultimately is a huge part of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Sam, I want to pose a question to you that came from our audience. to comment on the potential blend of using the gamification strategy as motivation to overcome, the inertia to move, patients and providers to action with regard to preventative or other monitoring apps.
Excellent question. So we, so at levelx, we do, we build content for providers.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, medical professionals. A lot of doctors don't like the term provider, but so we do for medical professionals. And there we're using, basically the neuroscience of play to help them, understand, do everything from example, we use the diagnosis example, right? Mm-hmm. Doctors are far more likely to recognize a disease they've seen recently, right? We can use the neuroscience of games to actually trigger recency bias. So you're more likely to recognize the disease that you've seen recently, even if it's on a virtual patient. Mm-hmm. I think that using these same techniques for patients, we're not actively doing that, but although we're starting to explore it, but that is actually also very interesting. Mm-hmm. And you see already there are companies that create things like digital therapeutics, which is using the neuroscience of games to treat things like ADHD and PTSD and things like that. But the same neuroscience behind video games can also be used to just drive positive user behavior. Right. The example I like that comes to mind is I remember, the Obama administration spent several $1 billion over 8 years to try to stem the obesity epidemic. At one point, their focus was like, how do we get overweight Americans to just get up and go for a walk? Mm-hmm. And then I remember, during the second term of the White House, all of the meritorious efforts were eclipsed by a single video game that got 40 million Americans up and walking for miles, and that was Pokemon Go. Mm-hmm. Right? We're literally downtown Chicago was a zombie apocalypse for 3 weeks, right? Chicago, there are no kids in downtown Chicago. But what this demonstrates is the ability of games to drive behavior change. And actually, every game is doing what Pokemon Go is doing. They're not trying to get you to walk around strange neighborhoods or go for, and what they're trying to do, though, is they're getting you to come back every day, invite your friends, engage with sponsored content, right? These are the things that games are doing through, reward loops and, hitting the right balance of reward and frustration and challenge and skill and all the techniques that we employ. But these are very effective at driving user behavior, including, as we've seen, in the real world. So there's a lot of opportunity to do that. And, eager to see some of the, talent from the games industry put their skills towards solving some of these behavioral challenges.
That's fantastic. All right, so as we wrap up here, I'm going to pose one last question to each of you. What more needs to be done? You're all doing amazing things in your respective areas to really just change the landscape and, in this journey around skin cancer. But what more needs to be done? There's, tons of folks here listening that are innovators or in places where they can have an impact. If I could just hear from each of you, Scott, what more can be done?
Well, certainly the first thing that comes to mind is money, but
yes,
what we're looking at are ways of connecting people and connecting dots and making a difference with especially those who are most vulnerable and really anybody that has a health condition or that might be facing it. So it's really to continue the involvement and working together. I think there's too many silos that still exist even in the state of Illinois, but working together and working with the community and partners and those who need us the most.
Totally agree. Sam, what more can we be doing?
Oh my God, we're all, look, when it comes to the application of video game technology for all this, we're all just scratching the surface. There's still a 20-year gap between what's happening in the entertainment industry from a technology and neuroscience perspective and what we see in medical training. So there's a huge gap to close, and it's going to take, lots of initiatives to do that across every specialty in medicine. But I want to, echo what Scott said. I think that, that kind of, cross-disciplinary collaboration is crucial. I think you kind of see some of the best examples here. I mean, Matter is a tremendous showcase for that. OSF is a great showcase for that. I mean, showing off all the cool stuff levelx is doing. Like, these things would not have been possible, or at least they would not have happened without the network at Matter and funding from OSF Ventures. So there's a lot more to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I mean, I was just going to say, I think the more it's not one directional, it's multi-directional throughout the entire system. I think, there's obviously more that can be done on the technology front to be able to make it more accessible, more easy to use, more accurate, more precise, more, widespread, all of that. But also on the system level too, there, more needs to be done to better educate the,
Sure.
The future generations of physicians, different ways to educate them, different access to the data that's available to do so, and different ways to do that. There should be more done on the reimbursement side of things, right? The entire economics of our healthcare system. When Scott talks about the money, right? Like, prevention is an especially difficult area because our system generally is more reactive than it is proactive. And so to be able to recognize the economics of how that all goes up, the more has to be across all of those different levers in order to really move the needle here.
Absolutely. Thank you all for that. Stephen, over to you to close us out.
Thank you so much. Thanks to all of you. Thanks, Traci, for moderating and leading the conversation, and Kyoko and Scott and Sam for your insights, and Sam, thank you for your digital pyrotechnics that are particularly impressive. Love it. And thanks to all of you for joining. If you enjoyed the conversation, you might be interested in some of our upcoming programs. We have one on August 23rd focused on the future of aging. We have one on August 30th on the future of dementia and Alzheimer's care. And you can, at matter.health, you can learn about all of our upcoming programs. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.